you know, Good morning, and welcome to the live stream service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart, Indiana. My name is Tina Porter, and I serve this congregation as a member of the worship committee, and also as a member of our ministerial search committee. We are a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed in our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed in our 7 principles, both of which can be found online. Together, we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. We are currently in search for a full-time minister. When we do not have a minister in the pulpit, we invite members or guests to share a special message with us. This is one of those Sundays. Reverend Kimberly Quinn Johnson will be speaking with us today. She has served as minister of the is serving as minister of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the South Fork in Long Island since 2015. Denominationally, she serves on the organizing collective board for Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism. She serves on the she is co-chair of the UUA Appointments Committee, is on the board of trustees of the UU Women's Federation, is a leader with the UU College of Social Justice. Reverend Johnson was also selected to co-present at the prestigious Berry Street Essay, the longest running lecture series in the United States, on its 200th anniversary in 2020. Reverend Johnson has a wide range of experiences which fostered her passion and expertise for racial justice work. Earlier in her career, Reverend Johnson worked as a union organizer with the United Auto Workers. She also taught women's and gender studies at New Jersey City University. Reverend Johnson is a graduate of Meadville Lombard Theological School, where she was awarded Faculty Award for Religious Leadership. And full disclosure, I was one person who was lucky enough to recruit Kimberly Johnson to Meadville Lombard, and she has been a shining star in my life ever since. During this time of responsible social distancing, we are striving to maintain the authenticity of our services. So we want to draw your attention to several parts of our service today. The bell you just heard ringing is our actual church bell. And I don't know about you, but for me, when I heard that today, it reminded me how long, 20 years, that bell has centered me spiritually. It's a call to settle myself in and become calm and be with people spiritually in a way that we don't often get to be with people except every Sunday. Later, you'll see the chalice, which is our actual church chalice, made possible by James Johnson. And the music you hear is recorded each week by our music director, Jeremy Jacobson. If you are willing and able, we invite you to leave your cameras on so that your fellow congregants can see you, just as they would if you were physically present. There will be a good time later in the service where you will be unmuted and be able to say a quick hello to your fellows. We are currently streaming on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. I hope you had time to review the announcements that were scrolling on the screen just before the service. If you have an announcement for Sunday worship, please be sure to contact Maggie Reiser and provide those church, ministry, or committee business announcements to her no later than Friday of each week. Now, I invite you to please take a deep breath and listen and join us in a spirit of reverence as we listen to our prelude. Will you join me now as we light the chalice? The words are on the screen. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life we share together.
Good morning. I am delighted to be with you this morning. I'm going to begin our worship with opening words from Rhys Williams. Break down barriers. Spirit of life, come to us to break down barriers, to widen horizons, to make us less judgmental. Help us to see the larger picture and the kinder conclusion, to love and let live, to embrace and forgive, to sustain and care. Help us to reach out to our better selves, that we may love more and hate less, care more and reject less, that bound together by understanding, we may sustain each other through trial and tribulation, through joy and happiness, through sickness and health. Help us, dear love, to be joined in a common purpose of hope and fulfillment. Renew and revive us. This morning we seek a common holy ground for one and all. Ashe, may that be. I think we'll sing together, and by together, muted in our own homes, this is my song.
This is my song, oh God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands afar and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But another heart, another land's beaten with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on global pine. But other lands have sunlight too global, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
Good morning. Will you now join me in stating our affirmation of faith? And then we'll move into our Greet Your Neighbor time where you'll be unmuted and able to share a brief hello. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. Service is its prayer. And this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Good morning.
Morning. Morning.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
Good morning.
Oh,
Morning. Special day.
Wonderful day.
and now join us as we sing again quietly to ourselves, unmuted, our doxology. I believe John will be muting us all soon.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and praise arise. Let peace, goodwill, all men be sung. Through every land and every tongue.
I didn't know who was going to unmute or introduce the story. So while I get that set up, does someone want to introduce it?
I can. And by get that set up, do you mean that you'll be able to show it from your computer?
I believe so.
Groovy.
Correct.
I like a story, even when there are no children present. In some congregations, we call it a time for all ages, because we really do mean that it is for all ages. That there are lots of ways that we take in information and lots of ways that we feel information. And one of them is through story. And so this story is a way for us to start to think about heroes and villains.
But I'll let you in on a little secret. Nobody knows the real story. But I'll let you in on a little secret. Nobody knows the real story because nobody has ever heard my side of the story. I'm the Wolf. Alexander T. Wolf. You can call me Al. I don't know how this whole big bad wolf thing got started, but it's all wrong. Maybe it's because of our diet. Hey, it's not my fault wolves eat cute little animals like bunnies and sheep and pigs. That's just the way we are. If cheeseburgers were cute, folks would probably think you were big and bad too. But like I was saying, the whole big bad wolf thing is all wrong. The real story is about a sneeze and a cup of sugar. This is the real story. And way back in Once Upon a Time, I was making a birthday cake for my dear old granny. I had a terrible sneezing cold. I ran out of sugar. So I walked down the street to ask my neighbor for a cup of sugar. Now, this neighbor was a pig. And he wasn't too bright either. He had built his whole house out of straw. Can you believe it? I mean, who in his right mind would build a house of straw? So, of course, do.
I don't think I have the rest of the link. That's all that was on that link. Do you have the rest of it?
I do. I just closed it because I thought we wouldn't need it. I'm so sorry. Give me 1 second. Or really more like 30 seconds. So if I were doing this in person, I would just tell you this story, which is a lot of fun. And also, the limitations or the opportunities of Zoom mean that we get to experience media in a few different ways. And so I am going to share my screen like that and enlarge my video like that. And let's resume.
So, of course, the minute I knocked on the door, it fell right in. I didn't want to just walk into someone else's house, so I called, little pig, are you in? No answer. I was just about to go home without the cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake. That's when my nose started to itch. I felt a sneeze coming on. Well, I huffed, and I snuffed, and I sneezed a great sneeze. And you know what? That whole darn straw house fell down. And right in the middle of the pile of straw was the first little pig, dead as a doornail. He had been home the whole time. It seemed like a shame to leave a perfectly good ham dinner lying there in the straw. So I ate it up. Think of it as a big cheeseburger just lying there. I was feeling a little better. But I still didn't have my cup of sugar. So I went to the next neighbor's house. This neighbor was the first little pig's brother. He was a little smarter, but not much. He had built his house of sticks. I rang the bell in the stick house. Nobody answered. I called, Mr. Pig, are you in? He yelled back, go away, Wolf. You can't come in. I'm shaving the hairs on my chinny chin chin. I had just grabbed the doorknob when I felt another sneeze coming on. I huffed and I snuffed, and I tried to cover my mouth, but I sneezed a great sneeze. And you're not going to believe it, but this guy's house fell down just like his brother's. When the dust cleared, there was the second little pig, dead as a doornail. Wolf's honor. Now, you know food will spoil if you just leave it out in the open, so I did the only thing there was to do. I had dinner again. Think of it as a second helping. I was getting awfully full, but my cold was feeling a little better, and I still didn't have that cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake. So I went to the next house. This guy was the first and second little pig's brother. He must have been the brains of the family. He had built his house of bricks. I knocked on the brick house. No answer. I called, Mr. Pig, are you in? And do you know what that rude little porker answered? Get out of here, Wolf. Don't bother me again. Talk about impolite. He probably had a whole sack full of sugar. And he wouldn't even give me one little cup for my dear sweet old granny's birthday cake? What a pig. I was just about to go home and maybe make a nice birthday card instead of a cake when I felt my cold coming on. I huffed, and I snuffed, and I sneezed once again. Then the third little pig yelled, and your old granny can sit on a pin. Now, I'm usually a pretty calm fellow, but when somebody talks about my granny like that, I go a little crazy. Cops drove up. Of course I was trying to break down this pig's door. And the whole time I was huffing, puffing, and sneezing and making a real scene. The rest, as they say, is history. The news reporters found out about the 2 pigs I had for dinner. They figured a sick guy going to borrow a cup of sugar didn't sound very exciting, so they jazzed up the story with all that huff and puff and blow your house down. And they made me the big bad wolf. That's it. The real story. I was framed. But maybe you could loan me a cup of sugar.
True story. At least we're sticking to it.
That's a great story. Thank you so much for sharing it. And thanks to everybody for your continued patience as we learn new modes of doing church. This is the time in our service where we take a minute to type our joys and sorrows in the chat box to share with each other. I'll just share with you briefly since I have the mic for the moment. Brian made me work really hard in the yard yesterday, but it was great because one of my friends that I see very, very seldom happened to be driving by the yard and stopped to go, woo! Only she was louder. I didn't want to yell it in your ear. So we were very excited in our household about the results of this election. And I slept very well last night for the first time in a long time. And I hope you all are sleeping well too. Please share your chat. Share your joys and concerns that you may not have shared in the chat box. And I hope you all are staying safe and wearing masks and being good citizens.
We're all trying to mute at the same time, and though we say 2 wrongs don't make a right, 2 unmutes still end up as a mute.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm going to invite you now to pray with me, if that is something that you do. To breathe with me, if that is something that you do. Feel the air in your lungs and out through your nose or your mouth. To notice where you are in space. To notice those people who are with you physically. Call to mind those people who are with you in your heart. These are difficult and glorious and difficult days. We pray for gratitude, with gratitude, for all of our blessings, for the blessing of this community, that we have been able to gather in this way this morning. We grieve our continued losses from COVID and otherwise, tinged by political fights that seem unnecessary. I know this morning many of us are celebrating, but we offer this prayer that even in the midst of our celebration, there is still fear and concern for individuals in this country and this country as a whole. I pray that we have the strength and the courage to love when it is challenging, to challenge in ways that are loving, to live into every day the promise of what this faith offers. In the name of whatever you hold sacred. Amen. Be blessed. Ashe.
I know this rose will
a reading to begin this message. It's from the Reverend Teresa Soto. It's called Taraxacum. And I wonder if anybody knows what Taraxacum are. Even though they are edible, someone decided that dandelions are weeds, stragglers to destroy, to uproot. But dandelions never got the memo, never thought to care. Busy instead with dropping roots, flinging seeds, unfurling shoots, and persistent in digging in that taproot to depths of 2 or 3 average adults end to end. The tiny yellow flower survives. You are no less resilient, reaching both down to the strength that holds you and up to the light, out with your beauty. And you know, having sunk your effort into the cool, damp earth, that while dandelions can be clipped and fought, uninvested in anyone's opinion, they throw their sparkling futures onto the wind. Tomorrow, tucked into seeds, and grow all the way back, strong and bowing at the same time. Taraxacum are dandelions. I was quite old before I realized that anyone considered dandelions to be weeds. To me, they were summer and freedom and running. It's funny, the things that we pick up when we are children and carry with us, like stories. I love all kinds of stories. I love folk tales and fairy tales. I especially love superhero stories. I'm not going to call myself a comic nerd. That's not true. But I do stand for lots of the superheroes. The DC comics with Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman. Marvel comics with Iron Man and Black Panther, Spider-Man. And if you really get into them, these are more than children's stories. These are complicated stories. Heroes with troubled pasts who work outside of the law, who sometimes work against each other. Heroes and villains at the same time. The field of literary analysis is filled with scholars who explain to us how we are each the heroes of our own stories. We are the center of a great adventure, charting a course. Maybe you are the star of a romance or a tragedy. However we imagine our story, we aren't side characters or bit players to be acted upon by others. Maybe sometimes for a bit, but mostly in our stories, we allow ourselves to be centered as hero. And we all have a story to tell. Generally, in our stories, we are good and righteous. But taken from the perspective of others around us, our same stories, told from a different point of view, may show us not to be heroes, but to be villains. Take the three pigs. We all know this story. We grew up with it. We know who is the villain. The big bad wolf, big bad wolf. But from a different perspective. When you hear the wolf's story, does your understanding or opinion of hero and villain change? Maybe just a bit. Around this time last year, I was in a workshop, a training with other religious professionals, and we were given this exercise around the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. We were asked to read the story, to remember the story, and then to find ourselves, to place ourselves in the story. You must remember this. Goldilocks, golden-haired girl, wandering through the woods, who knows why, makes her way to this house that is not hers. She goes in and she tries the porridge and the chairs and the bed. And eventually, Mama Bear and Papa Bear and Baby Bear return home and are surprised to find that someone has entered their home and destroyed their property and eaten their lunch. Where do you find yourself in this story? Are you Goldilocks? Maybe you are the baby bear or the mama bear or the papa bear. Some people in my exercise, not wanting to follow the rules as they were set out, not uncommon for Unitarian Universalists, imagine that they were someone not yet written into the story. But where do you find yourself in this story? And let me tell you something else about October of last year. While we were doing this exercise, what was also in the news was the story of Amber Geiger, a real-life Goldilocks and the Three Bears, Goldilocks and the One Bear story. Amber Geiger, golden-haired Texas police officer who entered into the home of Botham Jean and shot and killed him. Where you place yourself, where you find yourself in the story, is shaped by history and identity. And those matter for who we see as heroes and villains. In lots of our congregations this year, these past 2 years, we have been learning and talking about the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery is this 15th century statement of international law sanctioning conquest and colonization. The idea was that Christian European nations, eager to claim the New World, had a legitimate right to colonize lands occupied by non-Christians. And so, let loose on the world, the doctrine of discovery was used as a justification for hundreds of years of colonization and imperialism. Less politely, for hundreds of years of stealing land and destroying people in their way of life. But if you are the European, you are the hero of a grand adventure exploring the world, claiming what is ordained to you. And if you are the descendants of those Europeans, you too are encouraged to imagine yourself as the hero of this story of discovery and exploration, adventure. This story is officially encoded in U.S. law in an 1823 Supreme Court decision that allowed white Americans to claim land occupied by indigenous people. The doctrine of discovery in our U.S. context, you might remember from your history class, manifest destiny. What could be more adventurous, more heroic than manifesting our destiny? It matters where we place ourselves in the story. For many, it is a story of a nation ordained and directed by God to move forward as the hero of their own grand adventure. And if you are the hero, then it's okay when you claim the land and the rights of the villain. But the story looks so different when we talk to our indigenous siblings who were displaced, whose land was stolen and poisoned, whose people were decimated, whose sacred burial grounds still today are decimated. We are the villain in their story. Sometimes, however proud we are of our own stories, however heroic we imagine ourselves to be, we are the villain in someone else's story. As you use when we talk about abolition, we love to tell the story of Theodore Parker, who wrote his sermons with a gun in his desk to protect people escaping from slavery through the Underground Railroad. And we know that there were many Unitarians and Universalists who worked as part of the Underground Railroad. We don't talk about the part of the story that tells us that there were just as many who were not. There were just as many who believed that, however we felt about it, we needed to follow the law. Or who believed that the way things were the natural order of things. When we tell our story of the civil rights movement, we talk about James Reeb, Viola Liuzzo, heroes in this fight, our heroes. And there were as many Unitarian and Universalists and Unitarian Universalists who believed that this was not their fight in the North or the South. Even further along, we look at the Black empowerment movement in this faith in the 80s. And here, most did not support it today. Most UUs support BLUU, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism. Most UUs believe ourselves to be in the fight for racial justice. But now, even as it was true then, there are those among us who question, is this right? What does it mean for Universalists to encourage separateness? And so there were many Unitarian Universalists who did not then, and some who do not now, support that movement. And there were many Unitarian Universalists, particularly Black Unitarian Universalists, who left this faith because they could no longer sit and worship with people who they had come to see as the villains in their story. Psychologists will tell us about an egocentric bias, that it is natural, or at least predictable and expected, that we don't think about the effect we have on others. We center ourselves. There's nothing especially wrong with that. There's nothing abnormal or unnatural about it. But our faith, Unitarian Universalism, challenges us to go beyond this natural, expected, predictable instinct. We sing about seeing our faces in each other's eyes, hearing our voices in each other's words. Our faith challenges us to feel the power of each other's faith. We are called to do better, to do more. We are called to expand the circle of we, to broaden our perspective. We are called to imagine that when we are the heroes of our own stories, we may very well be the villains of someone else's. We are called to imagine it and to take it seriously. And when we move beyond our narrow perspective, how do our actions change? And here's where I'm going to throw you another challenge. Because just as we can easily identify ourselves as the heroes of our own stories, we can point to the villains in our stories. If you give me a minute or an hour, I can tell you all about who has done me wrong, both personally or politically. My story is full of villains. And I imagine that yours is too. And just as I am called to imagine that I am the villain in someone else's story, I am called to imagine that the villains in my own story are the heroes of their own. Those people who are deplorable, who are ignorant, who vote in ways that I do not understand. When they tell their story, they are good and righteous, not evil. Not a day has gone by these past few months when I haven't been able to lament or be angry or rage or hear that back to me about the idiots on the other side. Sometimes we call them idiots, sometimes they are incomprehensible, sometimes they are heartless and cruel. They behave in ways and vote in ways that denigrate my full humanity, that constrain my life and the lives of my people. They are the villains in any understanding of the word. And they are also the heroes of their own stories. And they are also my people. And what does my faith have to say about that? What does your faith have to say about that? When we tell our story from deep inside and we listen with a loving mind, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed, every kind, we each have a story to tell. And we are called to listen deeply to the stories of others. In the song we sang, my country skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. We sing about countries that are divided, imagining that in some far-off land, there are people who are just like me. And that is true, and this moment calls for something different. This moment calls for us to look at where we are, to look at our home, our land. We don't have to go to far off places to remind ourselves that the person around the corner, down the street, in the next town or state is just as worthy, just as righteous, maybe just as caring as I am, with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. And here's a final word. Sometimes we are the hero. Sometimes we're called to understand that my villain is also a hero. Sometimes we are called to be the villain, to be on the side of what is right and just. Sometimes we must be the villain. The Reverend Martin Luther King, when he died, was the most hated man in America. He was on the FBI most wanted list. He was disparaged and maligned by whites in this country. That's probably to be expected. But he was also disparaged and maligned by Black preachers, by those who had been his allies and his partners. Despised and maligned by the very Black people he was trying to get free. And today, he is a hero. Even though they are edible. Someone decided that dandelions are weeds, stragglers, to destroy or uproot. But dandelions never got the memo. They never got the memo that they are the villain in someone else's garden. They just go about doing their thing, dropping roots and flinging seeds, unfurling shoots, are persistent in digging. The tiny yellow flower, Reverend Soto tells us, survives. I am talking to you this morning about faith as if it is the simplest thing in the world. To love my neighbor, to love my enemy, my villain. As if it's just a matter of shrugging. I know that faith is hard. I know that love is hard. or at least it seems that way, because we are called to use it in difficult situations. I don't think about calling on my faith when everyone around is pushing in the same direction. I need deep faith when I am surrounded by villains. I need deep faith when I confront my own villainy. I need deep faith when I step out to cause some trouble, to be a villain. It is difficult, and it is also simple. It is as simple as a dandelion. You are no less resilient, reaching both down to the strength that holds you and up to the light, and then out with your own beauty. And you know, having sunk your effort into the cold, damp earth, that while dandelions can be clipped and fought, uninvested in anyone's opinion, they throw their sparkling futures onto the wind, a little bit of tomorrow tucked away into seeds. You, my friends, be dandelions, be heroes, be listeners. And when it's needed, be villains when it's hard and when it's not. Be dandelions.
So now is the time in our service that we ask you to, I'll borrow a phrase, be a dandelion. share your wealth with the congregation to help us continue to populate the virtual worship service, with great thanks to Reverend Kimberly Quinn Johnson, and all of the others. Next week we'll be having another guest minister, the Reverend Kiyama Rahman. She'll also be offering time at the beginning of the service for question and answer. And so we ask you to dig deep into your dandelion seeds and provide what you can to keep our church going. Just a reminder, we give to remind ourselves how many gifts we do have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and sacred space. Is not clickable, but I see that Valerie has shared a clickable link in the chat. So I ask you to listen to the music and give as you can to keep this church blowing in the wind as dandelion seeds. Join us again for our final hymn, We Would Be One. The words are on your screen, I hope.
We would be one as now we join in singing a hymn of love to pledge yourselves anew. True that I call and greater understanding of those we are and what in us is true. We would be one and living for each other to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a noble world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service with love and just to strive to make us free.
Our closing words are from the Reverend Harry Meserve. From arrogance, pompousness, and from thinking ourselves more important than we are, may some saving sense of humor liberate us. For allowing ourselves to ridicule the faith, the beliefs of others, may we be forgiven. From making war and calling it peace, special privilege and calling it justice, indifference and calling it tolerance, pollution and calling it progress, may we be cured. For telling ourselves and others that evil is inevitable while good is impossible, may we stand corrected. God of our mixed up, tragic, aspiring, doubting, and insurgent lives, help us to be as good in our hearts as we have always wanted to be. Ashe.
Won't you help me?
Gotta love me a little Jeremy at the end of a service like that. Join me in extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Might have been able to use a big bad wolf cough there on that chalice. I'm not sure. Y'all are going to be unmuted for our coffee hour here shortly. And as you're joining us, I'd just like to again thank you, Reverend Kimberly Quinn Johnson. How lovely to see your face. Miss seeing you every January, and I believe you're going to stick around for a little bit of the coffee hour. Oh, great. Thank you so much. And I know this will probably not be such a long coffee hour because some of us need to get to church and drop off bags of food. I know we do. So I am looking forward to hearing everybody's news about the sunshiny day. Is it sunshiny? I'm in the basement. Could you tell I'm in the basement? I'm in the basement.
It's sunshiny on Long Island.
Yay.
Thank you, Reverend Johnson.